The streets were empty, silent. The kind of silence that makes every heartbeat sound like thunder. Sam pressed himself against the cold brick wall, his chest heaving, sweat dripping down his temples. If they caught him this time, there would be no mercy, no second chances, just steel bars and cement walls waiting to swallow him whole. But it wasn't the jail that terrified him. Jail had food, jail had shelter. What haunted Sam was something far worse. The shame, the humiliation. His reputation on these streets meant everything. He was supposed to be untouchable, a ghost that the authorities could never catch. The last time? That was different. He'd had the flu. Anyone could get caught with the flu, he'd told his friends. It made you slow, made you weak, made you vulnerable. But tonight he had no excuses. 3 silhouettes moved through the darkness ahead, his pursuers. Each one carried a large torchlight, but strangely, none of them were using them. They were hunting him in the dark, trying not to give away their positions, which meant they knew something Sam didn't want to admit. They knew he was close. Sam's mind raced. How were they still tracking him? The entire street was pitch black. He'd made sure to stick to the shadows, to avoid every pool of light from the scattered street lamps. He should have been invisible. Then it happened. A vehicle turned the corner, its headlights cutting through the darkness like a searchlight. For just a split second, the beam caught Sam square in the chest, reflecting off something on his body. The light bounced back, creating a brilliant flash in the glass door beside him. He squinted, momentarily blinded, and then he saw it. The source of his betrayal. His shirt. That beautiful, free-flowing floral shirt he'd acquired just 3 days ago. The one he'd worn every single day since, because it made him feel invincible. The bright pattern was practically glowing in the darkness, announcing his position to anyone within 100 meters. His heart sank. He loved this shirt. But love wouldn't save him from a jail cell. Sam's fingers flew to the buttons. He ripped the shirt off, barely bothering to undo it completely, and rolled it into a tight ball. His eyes darted around until they landed on a dustbin nearby. Without hesitation, he tossed the shirt inside and plunged his arm in after it, using garbage to bury his beloved garment. His fingers touched something wet, something slimy, something that made every hair on his arm stand on end. He yanked his hand free, holding it as far from his body as physically possible. The stench that rose from whatever he'd touched was unholy. Like death and rot had decided to have a reunion party. But then something else caught his attention. A sliver of light, barely visible, seeping through a crack in the window beside him. Curiosity overrode disgust. Sam leaned forward and peered through the gap. Inside was a sight that belonged in a nightmare. A man dressed in a long, flowing red robe stood in the center of a room. Around him were large boxes, coffins, Sam realized with a chill. The room was lit only by candles placed at each corner, their flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. As Sam watched, 2 young boys appeared, moving like sleepwalkers, each carrying smoking incense. They drifted toward the man in red with an almost hypnotic grace. What kind of place was this? Sam stepped back, suddenly aware that his surroundings looked nothing like the market district he thought he'd run into. His eyes travelled upward to the building's sign, Brown Funeral Home. The words hit him like ice water. How did he end up at a funeral home? Footsteps echoed behind him. His pursuers had doubled back. They were coming. Panic seized him. Sam bolted toward the back of the building, his hands desperately searching the darkness. His fingers found a doorknob. He pressed. It opened. He didn't think, didn't hesitate. He slipped inside and eased the door shut behind him, holding his breath as the footsteps outside grew louder, then closer, then stopped right outside. The darkness. Inside was absolute. Sam stood frozen, listening to his own thundering heartbeat, until his eyes adjusted enough to make out another door across the room. Through its keyhole, he could see light, a single candle flame, and in the centre of that light, an open coffin. So those boxes in the other room were coffins, and that man in red? The mortician. Voices erupted somewhere in the building, multiple footsteps. They were searching the funeral home. Sam's hand found the doorknob. Please be unlocked. Please be. It turned. He slipped through, shutting the door silently behind him. He pressed his back against it, waiting for his heart to stop trying to escape his chest. The voices faded, moving deeper into the building. Only then did Sam turn around. Only then did his eyes fall on the contents of the coffin. Time stopped. The woman lying in the coffin looked like she was sleeping, peaceful, serene. She appeared to be in her 30s, though something about her suggested she might be older. She was dressed in elegant clothing, her hands folded across her chest. But what struck Sam most was how beautiful she was. Even in death, her features held a grace that made him forget, for just a moment, where he was. He stood there, transfixed, the danger outside completely forgotten. Then his eyes drifted downward, to her jewellery, the fine pearls around her neck, the golden bracelets, the rings. A familiar itch began in his fingers. The professional instinct that had kept him fed and clothed for years. It would be so easy. She didn't need them anymore. But no, he squeezed his fists tight. Stealing from the dead was sacrilege. He'd never crossed that line, and he wouldn't start now, no matter how desperate things got. He felt proud of himself for that, virtuous even. And then he saw it. On her right hand, fourth finger, a green emerald stone that seemed to capture and magnify even the dim candlelight. It was magnificent, powerful. It was the royal ring. Recognition slammed into Sam like a physical blow. This wasn't just any dead woman. This was Queen Margaret Isabella Marcel, the beloved ruler who had died mysteriously just 2 days ago, throwing the entire kingdom into chaos. The palace maid who found her body had screamed so loudly that half the castle heard it. The king, they said, hadn't left his chambers since, lost in grief, lost in shock. And here she lay, in a simple funeral home, away from the palace, away from the world that mourned her. The doorknob moved. Sam's body reacted before his mind caught up. He dove behind the thick curtain in the corner, pressing himself flat against the wall. Through a gap in the fabric, he watched a young man slip into the room. Not one of the mortician's assistants, this boy moved too carefully, too secretly, like someone who wasn't supposed to be there. The young man approached the coffin slowly, reverently. He knelt beside it and stared down at the Queen's face with an expression of such profound sorrow that Sam felt uncomfortable watching. This was grief, raw and unfiltered. After what felt like an eternity, the young man stood. From a bag he'd brought, he began removing items: scented candles, fresh flowers, photographs. He was building something, an altar. Sam watched, fascinated despite himself, as the young man arranged everything with meticulous care on the room's only table. He lit the candles one by one, placed the flowers just so, positioned the photographs, all of the Queen, in a semicircle. Then he lit something else. Incense, Sam realized, as thick smoke began rising from the center of the arrangement. But this wasn't like any incense he'd smelled before. This smoke carried a scent that was simultaneously sweet and suffocating. It clawed at the back of his throat, making him desperate to cough. But any sound would give him away. So Sam held it in, eyes watering, every muscle tensed. The young man knelt again beside the coffin. And then Sam heard something that made his blood run cold. Sobbing. The boy was crying. I wish we had more time, the young man whispered through his tears. Time for what? The question burned in Sam's mind. And then another voice answered. I wish we had more time too. Both men, the sobbing boy and the hidden thief, turned toward the voice in perfect synchronization. The Queen was no longer in her coffin. She was floating. Hovering in the air above it, her form semi-transparent in the candlelight, positioned directly in front of the altar the young man had built. Whoa! What? The boy's scream split the air. His knees buckled. He would have collapsed completely if the floating Queen hadn't caught him, her ghostly hands covering his mouth to muffle any further sounds. Shh, she whispered urgently. Someone might hear you. The boy nodded frantically, his eyes wide as saucers. When she was confident he wouldn't scream again, she removed her hand from his mouth. How? The young man started, but couldn't finish. His brain seemed to have short-circuited. How can you see me? The Queen finished for him gently. The incense, she gestured to the smoking altar, and the room. I'm still transitioning. Then her expression softened, became almost girlish. Oh, this is beautiful, my love. This is why I love you. You know how to make a woman feel special. Behind the curtain, Sam's jaw had dropped so far it was practically on the floor. Why did you leave me? The young man's voice cracked. Why did you have to die? It wasn't my choice, my love. What happened? Were you ill? I don't know. The Queen's form flickered slightly. It happened so fast. One moment I was alive, and before I knew it, I was dead. Something must have happened. The boy was grasping for answers. Can you remember where you were? What you were doing? I was at home, she started, but her words died mid-sentence. She turned sharply toward the window, her expression suddenly alert, worried. What is it? My love, I have little time. Time for what? Confusion painted his face. I'm transitioning very fast. For the first time, fear flickered across her ghostly features, but just as quickly she forced it away, replacing it with desperate enthusiasm. Let's do something eventful before my time is up. Something like what? Let's go out. The night is out. Are you out of your mind? Shh, she cautioned again. Someone might hear you. Come on. Her voice took on a pleading tone. The night seems peaceful, And this will be the last time we'll be together, until we meet again in the afterlife. There are people in the corridors, the young man argued reasonably. What do you think they'll do when they see you? We won't take that way. Her voice was firm, final. There's only one door out of here. We won't take that way, she repeated, then pointed directly at the window. The window? The boy's mouth formed a perfect O of shock. Behind the curtain, Sam had to physically restrain himself from laughing. But the Queen wasn't joking, and the young man, despite every logical protest screaming in his head, seemed unable to deny her. How could he? She was dead. This was their last chance, their final goodbye. With shaking hands, he moved to the window, unlatched the bolts, pushed it open, then stepped aside, a gentleman to the end. The Queen floated toward the opening, her form gliding gracefully through the air. She ducked her head through, and that's when everything changed. The moonlight touched her skin, and her body transformed. The beautiful, serene face melted away, replaced by exposed bone and rotting flesh. Her elegant form became a skeleton, barely held together by strips of decaying tissue. Her ghostly white dress clung to bones that shouldn't be able to stand. The thing that had been the Queen turned to look at the young man with empty eye sockets that somehow still conveyed emotion. The young man's scream could have woken every corpse in the funeral home. He lunged forward, grabbed the window, and slammed it shut with such force that the glass nearly shattered. The skeletal apparition was left outside, pressing its bony face against the window pane. The young man didn't wait, didn't explain, didn't even grab his bag. He ran, threw open the door, and disappeared into the corridor, his footsteps echoing his terror. Sam stood frozen behind the curtain. His entire world view had just been shattered. He'd never believed in ghosts, spirits, the supernatural. He'd thought he'd witnessed some elaborate prank at first, right up until that window moment. But there was no faking that transformation. No makeup artist in the world could create that effect in real time. No trick of the light could explain what he'd just seen. The place was cursed, evil, wrong. He needed to leave, now. Footsteps. Someone was coming. Running by the sound of it, moving fast. Sam looked around desperately. The room was practically empty, nowhere to hide. He considered the space under the table, but it was too exposed, too obvious. The doorknob turned. He was out of time. The door swung open. A hand appeared first, gripping a flashlight, then a head, the mortician. The beam of light swept across the room, catching the empty coffin. Then it landed on Sam, frozen in place like a deer caught in headlights. For one long, endless moment, they stared at each other. The mortician's eyes moved from Sam to the empty coffin, back to Sam, back to the coffin. Sam could see the questions forming. What was he doing here? And more importantly, where was the Queen's body? Other voices echoed in the hallway behind the mortician, more footsteps. His pursuers from outside had entered the building. The mortician's mouth opened, ready to shout, ready to accuse, ready to alert everyone. Sam made his choice. He ran, straight at the window the young man had just closed. His shoulder hit the frame as he fumbled with the latch. The mortician shouted behind him. The footsteps in the hallway turned into stampeding boots. The window flew open. Sam didn't think, didn't look, didn't consider what might be waiting on the other side. He jumped. The night air rushed past him, For a moment, he was flying, free, escaping both the law and the supernatural in one desperate leap. Then gravity remembered he existed. He hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he was up and running before his mind could process it. Behind him, voices erupted from the funeral home. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, searching. The mortician was shouting something about the Queen's body, about a thief, about sacrilege. But Sam was already gone. He ran until his lungs burned, until the funeral home was far behind him, until the only sounds were his own ragged breathing and the distant hum of the city at night. Finally, he stopped, pressed his back against a wall in an alley he didn't recognize, let his legs give out as he slid to the ground. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he'd witnessed. The Queen was dead, but also not dead. She could speak, float, transform into something out of a nightmare. And she'd been having a love affair with someone who clearly wasn't the king. What other secrets did the Queen's death hide? What really happened to her? And why was she transitioning, whatever that meant? Sam looked up at the moon, the same moon that had triggered the Queen's horrifying transformation. He'd come to the funeral home running from the law, but what he'd found was far more dangerous than any jail cell. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. The search was expanding. They'd be looking for him everywhere now. A thief who'd desecrated the Queen's body. A criminal who'd broken into a funeral home. They'd never believe the truth. Hell, Sam barely believed it himself. He closed his eyes, finally allowing himself to feel the fear he'd been running from. Because somewhere out there, the Queen's ghost was still transitioning, still trapped between worlds, still searching for answers about her own death. And Sam had just become a witness to something he was never supposed to see. The question wasn't whether his pursuers would catch him. The question was whether something far worse would find him first. What happened to Queen Margaret Isabella Marcel? Who was the mysterious young man? And what does it mean that she's transitioning? Find out in part 2.